All yours, Tagore.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are continuing the topic of Gospel of John, and then I will keep the presentation to under an hour, so that all through summer probably we would be sticking to this rule. So I would go a little faster, and let's dive in. So far, we have covered few topics in first 3 chapters, and we have covered new covenant, just barely introduced the new covenant. Today, we are going to talk a little bit more about what this new covenant is. And then new temple, we discussed about this new spiritual temple, and also discussed about new birth, which brings us into this new kingdom. Actually, these two are greatly related to one another. And then last time we discussed about new survival in this spiritual wilderness. You are in danger of bitten by spiritual snakes, and in spite of bitten by snakes, you can survive when you look to cross what it means. And plan for today, several new things are introduced in Gospel of John, Gospel according to John. Today we are going to cover 3 topics: new water, or spiritual water, or spiritual living water. And then new worship. It's a brand new worship. And what about that? And those who do this worship are called new worshippers. New worshippers. So what is this worship, and what is this worshippers? So these two are tied together. If somebody is doing this worship, you are a worshipper. And if you are not this new worshipper, you will not be doing this new worship. So these are very intricately interconnected. And the new water, last time we discussed about surviving the spiritual wilderness from snake bites and scorpion stings. And then the other danger is, for the survival, no water, no food. Now we're going to touch base upon the water, the spiritual water, absolutely essential for your survival in this spiritual wilderness. When we come to chapter 6 of John, then we would be introduced to new bread. So these two are very related. New water is introduced in chapter 4, and then chapter 6, new bread. So we cover all the 4 features of the wilderness: serpents, scorpions, no food, no water. God provided manna as the only source of food, and also the water that He provided is the only source. Any other water is a danger. Either it is polluted, poisonous, or you have other infections. You need pure water from God. And we are going to cover first 26 verses of chapter 4. And today we're going to discuss in chapter 4, in first 26 verses, a Samaritan woman encounters Jesus. In chapter 3, we studied how Nicodemus, a Pharisee from Sanhedrin, he encounters Jesus. So we see various encounters of people, different people with Son of God, and each encounter brings us a rich set of teachings and a rich insight into the whole episode. So we go with episodes, and today we confine our discussion to this episode where Samaritan woman encounters Jesus Christ or Yeshua, Son of God, Son of living God. So I want to discuss something as an introductory thing for the new worship and new worshippers. We need to understand the word spirit, the spiritual architecture of man. Just want to introduce, this is a huge subject. What are we composed of? When I say man, it also includes woman, and man, woman, children, every human being in our modern terms has something significant inside of us. Now, all of us have a physical body. We have a head and a body, and you have hands, and you have waist, and then you have legs, and you have feet. And this is everybody, all of us ever born were given a body, a physical body. And in addition to this physical body, we were also given a spirit, which is typically called spirit of man or human spirit. And this spirit is housed in this physical body. So we have a spiritual body also given to you. This is housed inside your physical body, and this spirit does not have life in itself. When God approaches man, when he defines and describes man, man is essentially dust or dirt. You are dirt, and to dirt shall you return. He did not say you are dirt plus spirit, and you would somehow live eternally. He did not say that. He said, like, you are dust, and to dust shall thou return. But how about this spirit? This spirit will not give you life. Your dirt gives you life, because the dirt has flesh and blood, the blood circulation in this physical body that causes you to live. The blood has to supply oxygen and nutrition to all the body parts, including your vital parts, lungs, heart, and kidneys, and also brain. If it fails to supply oxygen and nutrition to brain dies quickly. That is the first guy to die. And sometimes they're brain dead and live in coma, and people artificially make them live. But your spirit is also incredible essence that God gives you. And the spirit is a non-physical component. It's non-physical. And several scientists, especially those who believe in the school of evolution, struggle to account for the enormous difference between man and other creatures, either birds or fish or the land creatures. None of them cannot be compared with the intellect and the things that man accomplishes. Truly, man stands above all these things that they see, but they cannot account why the difference. The difference comes with the spirit. The spirit gives intellect and the consciousness and the awareness, and but the spirit does not give you life. As we discussed, it's the blood. Blood is always symbolized consistently from Genesis to Revelation. It symbolized life. So the circulation of blood, when it stops, the person is declared dead. And as long as you are alive and the blood is circulating, you are functional, and the spirit stays within you and make you aware, make you think, make you speak. So both are go hand in hand. In fact, if you take brain, most people confuse brain with mind. Let me pick up. So this is brain. This is physical brain, right? It's all convoluted sheet-like thing. And the top of that, there is mind. Now, mind is non-physical component, and it interacts with brain, and it also takes things from brain. And if you analyze brain, there are lots of things still puzzling to scientists. There is a tiny thing. The last time I studied the brain anatomy, there is a thing called thalamus, and above thalamus there is a tiny portion called hypothalamus. It's so tiny, but it controls everything in your body, your glands. And so I wondered, is that the connection point between your mind and your brain? So you have this mind, which is spiritual, which gives you the intellect. And similarly, you have a heart, and you have spiritual ear, spiritual eye, spiritual kidneys. And these are called inward parts. So outside the man appears, but inside a covered portion, which is spiritual, exists. This is called inward person or inward parts. So we are composed of several parts or several portions of this spirit, and each portion has a specific purpose. And sometimes God calls the whole person, inner person, as your heart. Sometimes it's very specific aspect of the spirit of man, and he distinguishes that from mind, and also distinguishes from the kidneys. And no matter how much you cut the man's body, you would never find where the mind is, because it is not physical, it is spiritual. Similarly, you can find the physical heart, but you can never find a spiritual heart. And you have spiritual kidneys also. So the spirit essence of man is housed in this body of flesh. Body of flesh is what appears outwardly, but the things that are not appearing outwardly are concealed. The word concealed is very important, because the Bible uses this concealed parts or concealed man. That's where God really working under the new covenant. So this is what we see. We have some bodily parts that are visible, and God uses them as a metaphor for us to understand the spiritual components within us. I've given very few of them. This is a big subject, and you have a mind which resides somewhere near brain. It has good interaction with the brain, but this is a spiritual component. And you have eyes, you have physical eyes, which are also made metaphorically referred to the different type of eyes. These are spiritual eyes. He who has eyes to see, let him see. And he who has ears to hear, let him hear. So there are spiritual ears which are able to receive spiritual information from God. So they are spiritually enabled. So these are different components with the different functional specializations. And Bible talks about also the mouth and lips and the tongue. These are three important pieces: mouth, lips, and tongue. It uses physical, which we are familiar, and explains to us the unfamiliar thing, that is spiritual tongue, spiritual mouth, and spiritual lips. Jesus at one time called Pharisees, your mouth is like an open sepulcher, open grave. It can be bad and it can be a good spiritually. Tongue of righteousness brings healing. So it can have positive or negative, but you should be aware of the components, the spiritual components that are within you. Then you have heart, and you have physical heart which pumps blood, and this has nothing to do with the spiritual heart. It is just an illusion, and God writes his law on the tablets of our heart. But don't confuse this heart with your physical heart. No matter how big, powerful microscope you use and see on its surface, you would not see a single commandment. Because the law is not physical, as it was written on the two tablets of stone. Now, under new covenant, law is spiritual. It has to be written on spiritual material, not on physical material. And in fact, the law is spiritual movements or signatures of the Father and signatures of the Son. So it is not written, even though it's figuratively called written. Those movements and vibrations and signatures are installed or instilled in our spiritual heart. So same is kidneys. Kidneys is a big subject, and you have physical kidneys which purify blood, and you have lots of fat around kidneys as well as heart. If you look at the anatomy, physical anatomy, they are heavily covered with fat. They are concealed. They are concealed. So here it is also concealed, heart, and and you have certain additional components Bible gives us, which do not have a physical counterpart. They stand alone, like conscience. Conscience is a moral monitor. It tells you good or evil when you do that. When you do something evil, when you violate something, and this conscience produces guilt. And when you do right thing, it also gives you an approval. So it's a built-in mechanism, this conscience. And when we come to New Testament, this is addressed in a big way. And this is where also it is important what we do here. And we have kidneys. And this concept is coming from Old Testament, and it becomes big in the New Testament. I am the one who searches both the heart and the reins of a man. So he says he searches heart, and the reins are EINS, reins. The word is kidneys, and Greek nephres. This nephres, two kidneys, and cardia, the heart, both are super important. So this is more deeper inside of you, very private. And this is what your inner person generally are. And the mind is very much present what you are now, what you are thinking, what you are planning to do. So those things happen in the mind at real time, but the heart is what you are always. This is where your will comes and your decisions come. And within the heart, there is a deeper you, which perhaps you also do not know much unless God shows you. Those are kidneys. And then you have spiritual hands and spiritual belly. When it talks about living water, when I give you the living water, out of that person, the living water would flow out from his belly. a spiritual belly, and you have spiritual feet, which have to cleanse. In addition to these things, the conscience, you have also a thing called beast or flesh or sin engine. This is like an engine, and some people call it as human nature or sinful nature, or flesh. In sometimes it is called flesh figuratively, and it is also called beast. And this is actually, I couldn't fit in the picture. This is like an animal within us. Every man and every woman have this component within them. This animal takes over every other component and makes you behave like an animal. Animal, when I say, I'm not talking about the pets that you love. It is like a wild animal. You have no discretion, and you have no concern, no sensibility, no sensitivity, and all the manners and all the good things that you have learned are just wiped away when this guy hijacks you. In fact, he is much bigger than the diagram represents, uh, and nobody knows how big this guy is. This is also a spiritual component. I believe this is much bigger than we ever thought. When this guy takes you over rest of the components, when you are under grips of this, you behave like beast. No sensibility, no sensitivity. All of us can recall moments and times in our lives we should have behaved much better. We knew better, but still we fall victims to this flesh. And this is not external to us, this is internal to us. In fact, God calls us as part of us. And until we die, we have to live with this guy. This is enemy within, and enemy sleeping with us. And this guy suddenly wakes up and takes over when an opportune time comes. So he has his own game and his own strategy, and he makes you fall, he makes you sin. And don't confuse this guy with its devil. Devil is external enemy. This is internal enemy that causes us to sin. And this actually, devil uses this guy. His work becomes easier because of this guy to get us. And how we got this guy? Courtesy of Mr. and Mrs. Adam. When they sinned in Garden of Eden, the sin entered through one man to all the human beings, and all have sinned because of this sin. And this is a pretty big uh, magnitude, size, and never underestimate the power of this. And then with this background, your spiritual, inward spiritual man or woman is housed within this. So these are inward parts. So with this background, when God says spirit, it is very contextual. And when sometimes he talks about all the spiritual components within you, and he calls them as spirit. So this is very important when we discuss the new worship, because it is closely tied up to this new worship. So let's go to the next slide. Now, when we come to new covenant, the things are addressed at the level of spirit. That means your spiritual components within you have to be changed. And let us see the new covenant, some verses. We know we already familiar with these diagrams: physical Israel, physical Egypt, physical Pharaoh. This is all physical, a type and shadow of spiritual. When we come to spiritual, Satan and spiritual Egypt, from these two guys, we are redeemed. We are spiritual Israel. We are drawn from both physical Israel as well as physical Gentiles. Now we are spiritual Israelites. And instead of Moses, we have Son of God, Yeshua, Jesus. He brings us to the Mount Sion or Zion, and makes us to enter into a covenant with him and his Father. And he brings the law, just like Moses brought the law. But here the law was written on two tablets of stone, but here they are written in our inward parts. That's where we discussed in the previous slide. The law is written on your heart, on your mind, on your kidneys, and on your hands, on your tongue, and your ears, and your eyes. Because it is law is no longer thou shall not kill or thou shall not covet. The law is much broader. It encompasses much abstracted spiritual movements within your inner components. And let's see like few fascinating things when God first time introduces the new covenant in Jeremiah 31. This is way back. God tells certain fascinating things. Jeremiah 31 is a good chapter to go to understand new covenant. He says few profound things. Jeremiah 31 verse 27, behold, the days come, said the Lord, I will sow the house of Israel and house of Judah with the seed of man and seed of the beast. Just notice these two things. There is a seed of man and seed of beast. So he makes that new covenant with these two components within us. And we just discussed the animal that you have within yourself, the spiritual component called human nature. Different terms are used by different teachers and students. That is abstracted as seed of the beast. This is a seed as if God has planted already. And then the seed of man. The man is son of man or son of God. So this is Christ in you. There is a two seeds. One is seed of Christ. Christ is the seed, and other is seed of the beast, which you already have when you are born. And he is sowing. He is sowing. God is planting these two seeds, and God is responsible. And when two seeds are sown in a finite container, only one seed would grow and survive, and other would be other would be choked to death, and other would be killed. So with this two seed, only one seed would survive, and that determines your destiny. If you let the seed of beast grow in you, and you become like beast, and when you come to new covenant book of Revelation, there are only two images, spiritual images that you can bear. Image of the beast, that's what people would receive. Or if you crucify this flesh or the beast and let this seed of Son of God within you grow and become mature in Christ, and you bear his image, you become more like him. Remember, there are only two images in Bible, image of the beast and image of Christ. To which one do you conform? To which one you become like? So this is kind of God got it written for us when we come to new covenant way back in Jeremiah 31. There are other interesting things he says. In those days, they shall say no more. No more, they will say, fathers have eaten a sour grape, and the children's teeth are set on edge. This is a saying, this is a proverb in ancient Israel. Fathers ate sour grapes, and children's teeth are set on edge. But God says, they shall say no more when we come to new covenant. Everyone shall die for his own iniquity, and every man shall that eats the sour grape, his teeth shall be set on edge. So he is delinking you from your fathers. Your father's sins would not be transferred to you. You will die because of your own sins. On the converse, your father's righteousness will not be transferred to you. If you are righteous, you have to be righteous if you want to live. And everybody is evaluated and judged by what he has done, he or she has done. It has nothing to do with your ancestry or pedigree and what your father and grandfather did. Everybody is individual and personal. This Israel is very individual. One person after other would be brought out of this Egypt, and you alone have to walk in this way. You cannot walk for somebody. You cannot claim that your father or grandfather, great uncle has walked, so I should automatically walk. God is dealing everything. So every man shall die with for his own iniquity. So these are foundational statements for new covenant. And then, behold, the days come, said the Lord, I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and house of Judah. These are spiritual houses of Israel and Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by hand to bring them out of land of Egypt, not according to the old Sinai covenant, which my covenant they already broke, although I was a husband to them, said the Lord. But the new covenant comes. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, said the Lord, I will put my law in their inward parts. This is super fascinating statement. He's talking about inward parts where he will put his law. This is Hebrew word kerub. It is covered or concealed parts. Now, God doesn't tell us what those parts are until we come to New Covenant, New Testament scriptures, and write it in their hearts, Hebrew leb. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. These are all signature statements for New Covenant. He will write the law on their hearts and inscribe them in their inward parts. Wherever you see these sentences, that should flash your mind that he's talking about the new covenant. And also, I will be their God and they shall be my people. These are all signature statements of new covenant that God will make. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, every man his brother, saying, know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, said the Lord. I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. This is forgiveness. Total forgiveness of sin is possible only under new covenant. No wonder Yeshua Jesus Christ picked up this theme when he offered at the Passover the symbolic broken body and shed blood. Do this in remembrance of me. This is my blood shed under new covenant. That is how he picked up and completed this thought. Our sins are permanently, completely forgiven with his blood. And because of the new covenant, that's what he said. And with this background, let us dive into Gospel of John. And John 4, verse 1 to 8, here the Samaritan woman encounters Jesus at the well, which was actually given to Jacob. And Jacob gave it to his son, Joseph. And Jacob always remember his name was changed to Israel. That's a type and shadow of the new Israel that is going to come. Wherefore, when therefore the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself baptized not, but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again into Galilee. So here is the danger. When Pharisees began to see that he is making more disciples, now their focus is no longer on John the Baptist, but on Jesus in a negative way. They feel threatened and probably they want to persecute him. If possible, they want to kill him. When you have an enemy alive and active and seeking to harm you, it is not wise to go into their arms. So he avoided Judea and is departed again into Galilee. So the Galilee is the place outside of Judea, and Jews do not go outside of Judea because they have to pass through Samaria. Samaritans are like untouchables for them. They just detest them. So they don't go after Jesus to persecute him if he departs to Galilee. It's a smart and wise move on part of Jesus Christ. If Son of God, who is all knowing and all powerful, and his Father's full backing on him, if he is avoiding his enemies like this, how much more should we be wise and avoid our persecutors? And just to give you a thing, this is Judea. This is where Jews and Pharisees live. And when they came to know that Jesus is baptizing more people, and he immediately left Judea to go into Galilee. This is Galilee. This is Judea. North of Judea is Galilee. And in between these two is Samaria. Samaritans are there. And you have a town called Sychar. This is where the Samaritan woman encounters him. Probably this is the route he is going. And there is also Mount Gerizim, important, we will see. And he has to pass through Samaria into Galilee. And he could have chosen several routes, but there is an intention on him because the whole event, whole encounter is well orchestrated from heaven to teach us several important things via this encounter. So this is the Sychar, and he stops there, and his disciples goes into the town to buy food. He's all alone, and he comes to the well, and where the woman comes and draws the water, and there he asks the woman, "Give me a drink." So let's pick up the story, this map. And he must needs to go through Samaria because he is withdrawing into Galilee. Then cometh he into a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near to the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well, and it was about sixth hour. Sixth hour. Something to do with six. So, city of Samaria, parcel of the ground Jacob gave to his son Joseph, and Jesus comes there, and he's came to well, and then comes the Samaritan woman. There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water, and Jesus said unto her, "Give me to drink." Give me something to drink. Because his disciples were not there, they went away into the city to buy meat. Then said the woman of Samaria unto him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Jews have utter contempt for Samaritans, and they might say a word to a Samaritan man, but woman is beneath their dignity, even to consider her as a person. And you have a culture in that women have no standing as a human being, as a person. Those are like dangerous times for women, and it's very hard to grasp these things if you are born and raised in America. And she was shocked that he, being a Jew and he, being a man, is asking a drink of her. That was itself a surprise, and that's why she raised a flag. How come you are asking me, you being a Jew, and I am a woman, and not only woman but a Samaritan woman? So then Jesus makes a profound statement. Jesus answered and said unto her, "If you knew the gift of God," he's talking about gift of God, "and who it is that said to thee, give me drink, you would have asked of him, and who he would have given you living water." Now he's introducing a hugely different subject of living water. So if you would have asked him, I would have given you living water, and which is also gift of God. It is not for purchase, no price tag. So this living water comes from God as a gift, and only Son of God can give you this living water. And this itself is a huge statement for anybody to make. And when some stranger walks into you and tells these kind of heavy things, you get immediately suspicious and perhaps may take an offense. Who is this telling these things using the name of God, gift of God, and I would have given you living water? So woman is already confused, and then she also kind of questions him, who are you? And you seem to be claiming as somebody supernatural, but are you really greater than Jacob, our father, who gave this well? And we have all the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and other major prophets and minor prophets, all have come and gone, and they have a rich history of godly people and God dealing with them. Now this Jew, a stranger, comes and make this big statement, I will give you living water. So her response is quite normal and natural. The woman said unto him, Sir, you have nothing to draw with, the well is deep. She's still thinking about the water in the well. From where then has you that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well, and drank thereof himself and his children and his cattle? Who are you supposed to that you claim? Since you are talking about gift of God and living water, are you greater than our Jacob, our father Jacob? Certainly not, right? You look like an ordinary Jew. I can tell you that you are a stranger, but yet a Jew. So her reaction is normal, but she's also a little skeptical in her question. Then Jesus answered and said unto her, he elaborates what that living water he just introduced. Whosoever drinks of this water shall thirst again. That means the water in your well, which you are trying to draw some. If you drink that water, you would thirst again. You have to come back again for more water tomorrow, day after. As long as you live, you need this physical water, because your thirst is not satiated or quenched once for all. But whosoever drinks of the water that I shall give him, he will never thirst. But the water that I give him shall be in him a well of springing into everlasting life. Here we come to Zoe, this water of Zoe, this living water. It gives Zoe the everlasting life, or life aeonian, that is given via this water. And the water that I give you would satiate or quench your thirst forever. You would not thirst. You would never thirst if you drink this water, which I'm going to give. And in spite of her skepticism, he makes a bold statement and reaffirming just what he said, I will give you living water. Now he is giving more information to her as well as us all, that it is something related to the everlasting life. And he also makes another statement. Whoever receives this water, in that person, that water becomes a well of water, springing up into everlasting life. So he's introducing another well and another water. Samaritan woman was looking to the first well and first water. Now he's talking about new water and new well. The woman said unto him, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come here to draw. So she's still thinking in terms of physical thirst. And she doesn't need to come every day here outside the city to draw water. So give me, I have a magical solution. And then Jesus said unto her, Go, call thy husband and come hither. So he asks her to bring your husband, then we will discuss about this living water. And then woman replies, the woman answered and said, I have no husband. And then Jesus said unto her, You have well said, or truly said, I have no husband. For you has had 5 husbands, and he whom you now have is not your husband. In that you said truly. He just gives a little background about her life, what she did. And wouldn't that be all shocking if somebody tells you what you did in your life, the whole history, and it just shakes her, and she immediately changes her tone. She removes the skepticism. And the woman said unto him, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. See, she acknowledges, you no way you can tell all the things that I ever did. And then she asks a theological question. That's where really the meat of the teaching in this chapter 4. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain. Probably she was referring to Mount Gerizim, which we saw in the map. And ye, that is, you Jews, say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Jerusalem, we have this concept from Old Testament. Jerusalem is the place where God has put his name. And the whole Israel, one of the northern Israel, or Samaria, or Ephraim, starting from Jeroboam, they did not let people go to Jerusalem to worship God or to keep the feast. They put two counter pagan high places, Dan and Bethel. And that's one of the reasons they were sent into punishment, and they became lost tribes. And Samaritans, she is a descendant of those Samaritans, northern tribes, at least some mixed blood. We don't know if she's a pure descendant, but she says, we believe that we have to worship in one of these mountains, either Gerizim or nearby Bethel or Dan. Those are the 2 places where they have that cow, that golden calf. Remember Mount Sinai, golden calf, same thing comes back. And they believe that we should worship in the mountain. Ye Jews believe that you have to worship in Jerusalem. That is where men ought to worship. And here is the reply. He introduces new worship and new worshippers. Jesus said unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh, and when ye shall neither in this mountain, nor yet in Jerusalem, worship the Father. Ye worship, ye know not what. Samaritans don't know who they worship, what they worship. They are in ignorance. They're in darkness. But we, Jews, know what we worship. For the salvation is of the Jews. Salvation is of the Jews. And then here 23, but the hour cometh, and now is, this is very important. Now he is introducing new covenant and new worship. And when the true worshippers, just note this mentally, the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. There are 2 important requirements for the true worshippers: to worship in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeks such to worship him. And verse 24, God is spirit. King James puts a spirit. There is no A in Greek. It should be properly translated. God is spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So spirit and truth. And there's awful lot he's telling here. Neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. So there is no geographical preference to worship. It's an important departure from the old thinking, because he's bringing new wine. You have to put the new wine in new wineskins. It is not tied up to a particular place, either Jerusalem or Mount Gerizim or some other town, city, country, America. It doesn't matter which place you are, because this has to be done in spirit and in truth. And also, how many times you have seen the worship times in the front of churches? They have big sign, Sunday evening 4 to 6 worship times, or Sunday morning 9 o'clock is the morning worship time. That is really false. When we come to this new worship, it has no bounding with the time that you do the worship, 9 to 4 or 9 to 11. This worship is done in spirit and in truth. It is 24/7, all the times and all the places. And you don't go to a temple or a church or a place to worship, because there is no place that he is talking about, neither Jerusalem nor this mountain. It has to be done within your spirit and in truth. Your spiritual components, your inward parts, that's where you do the worship. And Father seeks such to worship him in that way. God is spirit. They that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Now, when we say spirit, most people go into demons and demonism and demonology and Satan. That is true. Demons and Satan are spirit beings, spirits. But when Bible introduces spirit or spirits or spiritual, don't confuse with the demonism. God is talking about himself. God is spirit. It is clear. And when you worship him by being spiritually minded, you are aware of God's presence, and you are spiritually minded, and you seek treasures and riches in heaven, not on earth. You are focused on worshiping and serving God in spirit and in truth. So the worship now is within your inward parts, concealed parts. And he makes the statement, salvation is of the Jews. Now, just in case some people might misunderstand that it is talking about Jews in the nation called Israel in Middle East. It has nothing to do with this country or nothing to do with their people. It is not physical Jews. These are spiritual Jews that he is talking. Only those spiritual Jews would be able to do this worship. So let's check Romans 2:28. For he is not a Jew which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh, but he is a Jew which is one inwardly. Inward parts are being changed. Your inward components, spiritual components, and the circumcision is that of heart. In the spirit, it's very important. It is all spirit, your human spirit, spiritual components, not in letter of the law, thou shalt and thou shalt not. It is much bigger. And whose praise is not of men, but of God. So it is talking about spiritual Jews. Now the new worship, I have put some closing thoughts. The new worship is not tied up to a specific place. wherever you are, whichever place you are in Montana or in Arizona, you still worship. It doesn't matter. The true worshiper, wherever he is present, he or she would do the worship, not tied up to specific time. The true worshippers will worship all the time. And the true worshippers worship in their inward spiritual parts. That is what to worship you in spirit and in truth. Worship God in spirit and truth. And they serve God with inner spirit within them. And they abide with God via new covenant in his Son. And they are continually being transformed to conform to the image of Son of Man or seed of man or Son of God, so that you bear image of Christ. Otherwise, you take mark of the beast or image of the beast. That's a dangerous direction which you don't want to go. You have only two alternatives, either image of Son of God or image of the beast. Remember, we are sown with two seeds, seed of man, seed of beast. And God writes his spiritual law in our inward parts, inward spiritual components, so that we are enabled or equipped to worship him in spirit and in truth. Today I discussed about in spirit, how we worship. And next presentation, I will talk about how we have to worship him in truth. These are two mega subjects that brings us to the conclusion.